Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Saturday. I'm Jamie Hernandez. I'm one of the program managers for WBD Access, which is part of the DEI team under Warner Brothers Discovery. And at Warner Brothers Discovery, we believe in authentic, meaningful connection to each other, our culture, and our consumers. So that's why WBD empowers fearless storytellers to bring our world into focus and create cultural touchstones with the power to draw us together. So through best-in-class talent development programs, mentorship, placement opportunities, and industry exposure, WBD Access serves as a powerful conduit connecting underrepresented talent to our content and our brands. So for more information, we're gonna show you a quick sizzle reel from our partners at HBO, and also a sizzle reel about some of the work that we do.
Take a deep breath.
Everyone is so different. Lean into that.
I love showing the world what you can do.
It's all me. It's all my heart.
I want to feel a rush of being alive.
I want to share that human experience.
That's my destiny.
Ready for the real work to begin?
It's big, it's huge, it's enormous, you get me?
Powerful.
It's powerful.
I'm so excited. We're going to make everyone so proud.
We will.
At Warner Brothers Discovery, talent is at the heart of everything we do.
Equity is so important. It's not about giving advantage to one group over another. It's about leveling the playing field. So every single person is able to access the same opportunities. That's what we want.
Diverse voices and perspectives shape the stories we tell and the future of our industry.
It's important that WBD supports diverse talent because that's going to be how we become successful in this industry.
But developing and amplifying underrepresented talent means going beyond the aspirational.
The better our stories are going to reflect the reality of what our world actually looks like.
Because real creative inclusivity requires real action. Change has to be intentional. That's why WBD Access offers best-in-class development programs designed to create new opportunities and cultivate the next generation of fearless storytellers and artists.
The WBD Access program is amazing. This program gives them the opportunity to be just ready for success.
I've just felt so supported. I felt really supported. There's just this synergy, I think, that happens.
It's about discovering emerging talent, providing tangible access to tools and resources, and most importantly, empowering people. Championing future leaders, storytellers, and artists.
Like the playing field feels more level.
Let's go, baby. Boom.
This is about bridging gaps and providing a real, true path into this industry.
Without it, I don't think I'd have a shot, genuinely.
As part of the company's diversity, equity, and inclusion team, WBD Access reaches a wide scope of talent from all over the world. Whether you're in production, post-production, animation, or unscripted, our programs are here for you.
To me, it's all about giving people a clear path towards a thing that they want to do.
With ever-expanding global reach already across North America, Latin America, Asia Pacific, and Europe.
What a gift.
We are always looking forward to the next big idea, the next cultural moment, the next great story, and the next wave of talent. Talent like you.
What is one word you would use to describe the program?
Innovative.
Nourishment.
Magic.
Inspiring.
Community.
Acceleration.
Effective. Transformative.
Game-changing.
All right, so yes, that's just a small sampling of what we do at WBD Access. But today's discussion, we want to have a fireside chat with an amazing TV director, a native Angelina Charissa Sanjarernsuithikul is a director whose roots in Hollywood began with her first job as a film projectionist. Her love of cinematic storytelling led her to USC Film School, where she discovered the magic of editing and developed skills that would lead her to an 18-year career in TV post-production. working alongside powerhouse showrunners as Greg Berlanti, Kevin Williamson, Shonda Rhimes, and Aaron Sorkin, the big names. Charissa's editing skills include the following: The Newsroom and Doom Patrol. Her love of photography and the ability to visually tell a story in a single frame, combined with her fluency of filming language and craft of performance, have given way to her inevitable true calling, which is directing. Charissa's first steps into directing began with shadowing working episodic directors to enrich her production knowledge of the TV landscape while learning the craft firsthand. This led her to directing a string of short films, with her latest, Post-Sentence, winning the Best Women's Short Award at the 2021 Cleveland International Film Festival. Her short films led her to directing programs, including the Warner Brothers Television Directors Workshop. Charissa's episodic directorial debut was the season 2 mid-season finale of God, Friend, and Me, and other series that she's directed include The Rookie, Good Trouble and The Watchful Eye, All American, and Found. Charissa, do you want to come on up? Yeah, it's such a amazing body of work, and you actually started in a different field, right? You started in post-production. So what made you want to pivot into directing?
Yeah, first of all, I just have to say, I've been at CAAMFest for 2 days. It's my first time here. I've been so moved by all your guys' stories, so thanks for having me. This is super cool. I came into directing via editing, which is not something that I necessarily sought out. Even when I first was interested in film and I went to film school, directing is not something that my personality felt like a good match for, especially the time that I went to film school. I was a very shy person. I'm still a shy person. Yet my passion for movies, TV, just stories that really connect and touch me universally, I found a home in editing because it felt like a safe space, and it's where I felt storytelling was where I could get in there and really shape things in my own way. And it wasn't until when I started out as a post-PA and climbed the ranks, I became an assistant editor and an editor, but my editor went on to become a director, and when he first shot his episode of TV, he came back and told me I needed to direct. And when someone comes and tells you what you should be doing and you don't see it for yourself, it's very difficult to process. But 4 years later, I knew that I had to pursue it. So that's kind of how I got here. And the Warner Brothers Workshop is what launched my career. Shot a short film, got into the workshop, and they gave me my first episode of television.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So what was that process like, knowing, you should try directing and that pivot, because, sometimes in the industry, when you're known for one thing, it kind of is a little bit hard to pivot into something else. So what was that process like, pivoting into directing from editing?
It is difficult because I feel like it's very easy to get pigeonholed in this industry. I think if you present as an editor, it's to come out and do something else. Even though we're all artistic, we all have different tools and we evolve as we grow. To me, it seems obvious, but for the industry, we still like to, kind of keep you in your box. And we know you as an editor, so we don't know you as a director yet. It's hard for people to take those risks. And the time that I came up also, you always had to prove yourself. So the workshop was something that really allowed me to introduce myself as a director. And because I came up through a craft and I did work with directors intimately on their episodes, I was able to strike up relationships and shadow on my own before I started any program that had these sort of protocols in place. But even still, there's generosity, but it takes time for people to change their view of you. And even of myself, it took me a long time for me to even call myself a director. I was very shy about it. I made a film. I didn't want anyone to see it, so there's a lot of growth that happened on my end as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And, you said that you made the jump into directing because somebody saw that in you, that you had that ability to become a director. But starting out your career as editing and now becoming a director, what do you think was the advantage of having that post-production background? What made having the post-production background become a better director for you?
I feel like editing is everything. A lot of directors actually don't know how to edit, and I feel I didn't necessarily know how to direct, but because I was an editor and I was so used to creating the finished product and seeing what worked and what had impact, how you convey emotion, and you have all these pieces of a puzzle that you have to put together, and it's a skill that takes a lot of time to learn what works. And so by doing it repeatedly over the years, and also cutting a lot of different directors' work, right? Coverage is so different, and there are a lot of directors where I really got their visual sensibility, and my favorite directors were the ones where I didn't have to make a cut, because they would design things and have the camera moving or the actors moving within the scene, and I'd just be like, I can just stay in the shot, right? And then there are other directors that just, you point cameras in directions, and I'm like, okay, I have to go here, and it becomes cutty, and it's a whole thing. So I feel like I developed my sensibilities by cutting other people's material and really understanding what I liked and why. And over time, I started to have this curiosity of what exists beyond the screen and seeing what being on set was like. And when I did transition into being a television director, I sit at Video Village and I'm looking at dailies, and it live, like I still feel I'm at my machine making performance choices, but on the fly, and that's very rewarding. My editing experience definitely translates to set, but I also get to collaborate with so many people who are bringing amazing things, and that's the fun in it, is this discovery of it too. Like, it's not final. When I'm editing, this is the footage, make it work. When I'm on set, it's like we can play and find things together.
Yeah, and I love the visual that you shared yesterday during office hours of like, when you were editing, you were like, I wish I could reach out to the screen and give somebody advice, but now being a director, you're able to do that and have the foresight to, really visualize that story.
Yeah, and it's also something too where I might instinctually ask for something, and then we try it, and I change my mind later in the cutting room. I don't have to make that decision on the fly, and I think as a television director, you definitely want to make sure you get honest moments and bring things that the showrunner is expecting, but you also can play a little bit and just find it together. And the actors also surprise you, which is one of my favorite things. I love being surprised, actually.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So we are at CAAMFest, and a lot of AAPI filmmakers that we've talked to over the course of this, they've struggled to really pursue filmmaking or a creative career because their families wasn't fully supported with that, or wanted them to go into medical field or be a lawyer, as we've heard them many stories here. But when you were younger, was the creative field supported by your family unit, and what was that like?
Yeah, I think I have a very unusual story. My parents, they had the first Thai grocery store in LA and were very busy working. I was raised, though, by my Irish neighbors who lived one street over, and so I became their adopted fourth child, and they were very creative people. They had kids who acted and danced, and we were encouraged to be that. So I had this sort of dichotomy of like a little bit of East at home and a little bit of West on, one street over, which was most of my waking hours, and I was always encouraged, and there was never a time where I didn't feel like I could do something. So having that sort of creative freedom, even as a kid, even though I myself had not found my voice or what that was and was very shy, I realized how much it laid the foundation for me to actually pursue a career in film. Because once I discovered that I wanted to do that, it was never a question that I wouldn't. I was never held back in that way.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So I want to pivot a little bit and talk about some of the fellowships and programs that you've been a part of, one of which is the Warner Brothers Directing Workshop. So can you give us a brief overview of what that specific program was like? How long did you work on it? What was that application process like?
Yeah, so at the time, coming into directing, I really I'd heard about these directing programs as a way to get into that. So I knew that I just had to shoot a short and apply by a deadline, but I actually didn't know how to make a movie. And at this point, I had already shadowed directors on set and gotten an education and exposure to it. But with the Warner Brothers program, it required getting in a top-tier festival and retroactively figuring out when you would hear by so that you could submit by the program deadline. But I did get in, and I got an interview, and through the interview process, you then meet with a showrunner, and if they like your stuff, you would get an episode at the time, and this was back in 2019. It was also a 6 to 8 week program with 2 directors who have been featured in this video, Mary Lou Belli and Bethany Rooney. They wrote this book called Directors Tell the Story, and it's the textbook of the program where it's a great book. You should check it out. But we basically took an episode of television that all the directors got to prep and go through the whole entire process of what it's like to direct an episode of television. And they brought in DPs, they brought in actors, we all directed scenes, same scenes in front of each other, and it was a great place to make mistakes, ask your stupid questions, and our teachers were tough, so I really felt like if I could convince them or impress them, then I could handle anything. And that's, honestly, it gave me the confidence to go out there and do it. Because the program was rigorous, but it was also very educational, and it gave me community, because directors don't necessarily, in my world, this is like so new for the whole community of what you guys have brought today and what you've shared with me. It can be a very solitary job on a crew. So within the workshop, I built my own community, and it's like some of my closest friends from that experience.
That's amazing. And seeing the workshop too, it's fascinating to see how many versions of a story could be told, right? From there's, I think you said you had 10 in your group that year? Yeah. So there were like 10 different takes of the same scene, right? It's pretty fascinating to see.
Absolutely, and like I really I feel like that's how I learned the best, was just seeing how other people carried themselves and how they communicated, and even when like people failed, it's like, oh my God, I totally would have done that, but they did that before and but it's such an enriching process, and we were very vulnerable in that workshop, but I feel like it really set us up for success.
Yeah, and it's also a safe space to experiment, right? You said like it's okay to fail and make and learn from mistakes and things like that, which is really helpful and beneficial in your career in the long run. So other than building community, you mentioned that. What were your other takeaways from that program?
I mean, I wouldn't have a career in television without it. There's so many things that led up to the point, all the encouragement, the experience of people letting me shadow and making a short film, getting in the program, and but yeah, I feel like I love editing, but I love directing more, and I'm so glad someone pushed me to my potential and saw that in me and made me actually believe it. And I feel like I see so many people in this room that are just so beyond where I was at that age, and you guys are totally uplifting. So I just keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing it.
So you started your directing with your debut in 2017. It's called Playing It Straight. It was an official selection at the 2018 CineQuest Film and VR Festival. And there are fellow directors here who have done films and are going through what you went through many years ago. So what advice would you give to these young storytellers, or young at heart storytellers, who are navigating this landscape now and maybe are thinking about a career into TV directing?
Yeah, I think you just follow your gut. Like, there's something driving you towards this. You're feeling impassioned and empowered. I think for me, I came up through a craft because I started as a post-PA in the industry and worked my way up that way. And it wasn't until I transitioned into a directing program that I kind of came out into and learn about this festival space. But a lot of people come in to be a director in different ways, and I just feel like their own crafts, their own expertise, those are going to be your superpowers on set. And the one thing I will say is, it's very easy to compare you to another director and just always sizing yourself up against somebody else, but I really feel like we have such unique perspectives. Like, every single person in this room from today, I would never have guessed that that was your story. And like, we just need to keep being us and keep telling stories and doing that. So it's awesome to see everybody collaborating together. I think that's the beauty of filmmaking in general. So to be able to do that in the festival space like this, like you're gonna get noticed. You have something to say, and you'll get to where you need to go.
Yeah, you mentioned collaboration, which is really important in TV directing. So do you mind walking us through, it's not really a day in the life, I guess it's an episode in a life. So let's say you've been picked to direct an episode of TV. What is that process like for you?
So the moment I book a job, I go and binge the show, because you want to be an expert on all things that show. You want to learn the visual vocabulary, you want to understand the rhythm, you want to see who the characters are or know all their backstory. These things are important, and it'll actually help you like gain the actor's trust when you first meet them, when they realize like, oh, this person actually knows the show. Yeah. There are a lot of people who don't do their homework, and I think that's revealed very quickly. So knowledge is power. I definitely inform myself. But in terms of the actual process, once you start, television episodes are typically 3 weeks, and you have 7 days of prep, which is a bunch of meetings with department heads, various things, and you just keep talking about the episode and planning up until your shoot, which usually is 8 days. So that's the process, and every meeting I'm lining the script, and whether it's a concept meeting, I'm figuring out what is the concept of the episode. The showrunner will share their thoughts on how they see it. You know, you have prop meetings, you have wardrobe meetings, and it's just an opportunity to delve deeper. Meanwhile, you hopefully, some shows will allow you to prep with your DP, others you may not have that time, but always trying to get conversations with your DP. If you have really like complicated shots or something conceptual that you want to try, you'll get these conversations going, and your AD who's scheduling the show, and your right-hand person in executing all your ideas and making it happen on schedule.
Are you involved in post as well, or?
Yeah, so after you wrap, you've got usually 4 days, the editor's working on their cut, and then you get to come in and do 4 days of notes, whether that's over Zoom, in person, and then when you turn over your cut, that's pretty much when you're done. The showrunner does their thing after that.
Yeah, it sounds like a really fun process, and you know, with I don't know if many are familiar, but typically with TV, you come in and direct one episode, and there may be a different director for another episode, so it may not be the same director for the entire season of a show.
Yeah, we're on a rotation. You know, as an editor, it's usually the 3 editors rotate, but with directors, you can only do maybe 1 if they like you, 2, maybe 3. But just they'd like to bring different voices in. You know, a show can get stale if you have the same sort of ideas, and I know a lot of shows that really invite that unique perspective. So that's a fun thing about television too. Is like I don't even know what my script is going to be until the script I get it, and it's always a prize. Like what do I get to do this time? And it's like, what's the big set piece for this one? So for me, that's the joy of television. I really get to tell so many amazing stories, so many different genres, and every episode's a new surprise.
What is the best thing about TV directing for you? Like, what is the fun part of it?
I just feel like I'm playing all day long. I mean, I really, even though there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to understand about how, you know, a show is made, the choices you make, how the politics and how you communicate with the crew, of course. But at the heart of it, like we're just making stuff up, and we're getting other people to come and play with us, and we're telling a story that someone will watch and maybe feel moved by, and it's just this regenerative thing that like makes me feel alive, and I really enjoy. As an editor, I felt isolated. But when I'm on set, when I get to work with so many different creative people, because the production designer is usually like brilliant, and everyone has their own instrument in their department, and everyone is an artist. So I don't know, I just really love playing with other creative people, and that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, it sounds like You're like, it's like the adult version of playing around, right? On the flip side of that, sometimes there may be challenges on set. Have you experienced a challenge on a set before, and how were you able to navigate that?
Time is usually the biggest challenge. You read these episodes and they're very ambitious, and a lot of times you don't know how you're going to pull it off, and your AD might tell you, like, this is unproducible. And sometimes you have to go back to the showrunner and find ways to simplify scenes, And other times you just have so much to shoot in a day, and something has to give. So being a television director, it's all about knowing exactly what you need, know that you have 6 other scenes you need to shoot, so you can't waste time on this one thing. But I think if I'm to think of like a story early on in my career, on my episode of Good Trouble, it was only my 2nd episode of television, I had 2 huge courtroom days, and it was like opening statements where lawyers were doing testimonies, and there were like 7 montages within this courtroom scene that was already like dense dialogue. And the only way that I could conceive pulling it off is if we block shot the whole thing. So we basically shot a whole day's work like one big scene, and it felt like a play almost. The second day was very similar because a lot of the setups were very similar, and it's just like, well, we're gonna, instead of breaking these down into little scenes, we should treat it as one big scene and shoot out directionally. And that's what does happen a lot in TV. It can just be a lot to manage, and for me, being a new director, it was very ambitious. But I think because I was an editor, I'm very precise and like just super detailed with those things, and we started to get momentum. And after it all worked out, it feels like the best thing ever. But when you're in it, you just don't think you're going to pull it off. It's a lot.
And I'm sure the end result just looked amazing, and you were able to, give yourself a pat on the back with just what you accomplished given that challenge, right?
Yeah, I mean, I look back and I think about like, wow, that was a lot to do, considering all the transitions that I had in mind and various things. But I didn't feel like I compromised anything because we planned it well. And that's the other thing too is I think producing my own short films gave me sort of an education in how to be more creative. And also there are things that like I could let go or I didn't need, and being an editor too, when you have so many people in a scene, it's like I could always cut away to somebody else. Do I really need this moment here, So it's just, that's where I feel all those things really I brought to the experience, and it helps give me confidence when I'm on the set in the moment we have to go. Do I have what I need here, and can we move on? Because there are a lot of things you just have no time.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this yesterday too, but one of the great things about directing is like that art of collaboration with your fellow actors, and when you break down a scene, like you're very receptive and open to ideas. You said that yesterday, that I think it helps you, with the scene, with having that voice from your actors too, right?
Yeah, no, definitely in my prep, I'll go and shot list and block and everything, and I have a certain way of how I imagine it unfolding. But then when you're rehearsing with an actor and they do something brilliant or just something that is totally not something you thought about, what I love about directing is me just throwing away what I had planned, because there's obviously something better in front of me, and sometimes it's more efficient to shoot it. So I really invite the process of allowing people to show me some great stuff, and then we can just go with that. It's the discovery of it all is sort of my favorite thing. Whereas if I was an editor, I would just, this is what it is, and this is finite, and being a director invites those possibilities.
It must be fun having that sort of like surprise nugget. You're like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. It's really nice to see. Yeah.
It's also not your responsibility to have everything figured out. You want to prep to the point where it's like, I know how to lead this. If someone has a question, I have 25 answers for you. But let's make a decision on the day. And if someone does something really cool, like, let's go with that. I think that's my favorite part.
I love that. I love that collaborative environment for you. You must have, during your very early days, through your shadowing, seen some of that come to life too, right?
Yeah, no, I've had some very generous directors that I've got to shadow, and I just feel like the best directors are just wonderful people. You could feel their generosity, and the ease of their sets. It's so clear, and you can tell that the crew loves being there. The actors love being there, and I'm very lucky because my current shows have that culture. So when you feel safe, when you are having fun, it allows everybody to do their best work. So I really appreciated that I got to observe that early on and learn from them.
Yeah, it must make a huge difference being on a set and just everyone creating that environment, that safe space, right? Creating that inclusive culture. I think a lot of people make that intention of creating that inclusive environment, and it really does help ease like the long days and make it fun for the crew, because they're working very long hours and it's sometimes not fun, but I'm sure that helps.
It definitely comes from the top. I feel like I've been on a lot of shows that have some really strong leaders. The showrunners have just created this culture, and producing directors that I've worked with, and you can tell it all comes from a place of love.
I think we can we'll get ready to answer some questions from the audience, but maybe walk us through your first directing job first. Like, what was that process like? Were you super nervous? Were you how was that experience for you?
So it's one of those things where I actually got to direct on a show for somebody that I had cut for before and had also shadowed. And through the Warner Brothers directing program, I had the opportunity to shadow, go and meet the crew, figure out all the things before I had to direct. So when I went, shadowed, went away, and then came back as a director, like that separation really helped me kind of come into my own. But luckily, I had all this safety net before I had to do that. So yeah, I mean, obviously nervous, but really, like, I think what I do whenever I'm nervous is I just try to be even more excited. So that it's like a fine line, right? That fear of nerves and excitement. And so I tend to just steer it one way, and then I manage to get through it. But yeah, it's a learning process, and you're figuring out your process. And in the beginning, I may have been self-conscious of like, when they're asking me all the things of what I need, I didn't know that yet necessarily. I had to kind of feel it and find my way through it. So, but I was in an environment where I was trusted, and that's the thing. If people make you feel like you are trusted, you're a collaborator, go do your thing, you can do anything. And that's what helped me, get through it. And the more you do it, the more confidence you have and the more fun you have. So it's at the point now where I'm just like so excited to direct because I get to play with my friends again. That's how it feels.
I love that. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think we can go to questions now. If anybody has a question, there's a microphone right there. So. Or you can just say it out loud.
Oh, okay, cool. Hi, Jamie and Charissa. This was a really phenomenal fireside chat. Thank you so much. My name is Eden. I was one of the filmmakers at the Microdocs showcase earlier. I mean, I love this. Aside from being a documentary filmmaker, I'm a huge TV consumer. So, and I've always had a curiosity about, again, the concept of like breaking in, right? So I think some of the people in this room, we're dominantly in the documentary space, mostly independent. And so, I was wondering, Charissa, if you had any other sort of advice in terms of like kind of crossing over and like breaking in as an emerging director, again, from sort of more non-traditional spaces. Like, I mean, as you mentioned, right, the WBD Access program is a phenomenal way, but being cognizant of the fact that a lot of these programs are they're extremely hyper-competitive and selective, right? So, as a sort of reference, I saw this another similar program where it said, oh, you had to be in great standing with the DGA. And so, like, it's sort of like the whole paradox of like, oh, you gotta be in the union to get a union job, right? So I feel like that's a lot of the things that we play with. And so I'm wondering if you had any other sort of alternative routes into sort of like being discovered as a director. Could it be possibly like, like you mentioned, like shadowing? Could it be like reaching out to directors, reaching out to showrunners? Like, what's sort of alternative entry points, I guess, in terms of like trying to make it and break it into TV and getting noticed?
I totally want to defer this question to you because I feel like she has a point of view on it better than me. And I'm coming specifically from post-PA to editing and all that. But I totally hear you on that of it all. But yeah, I think she has great insight.
I think, for me personally, I think the beauty of this industry is that there's not one path to achieve your goals, right? I talk to so many directors, and everybody has a different path that landed them where they are. In terms of fellowships, what I would suggest is to just keep trying. There was a panelist yesterday that spoke about it took him 7 tries to get into the program. So definitely keep trying, keep making your work, keep doing the thing that you're doing, and pursue that creative endeavor, keep pushing, and just the mere fact that you're here, that you're showing a film in a festival is already, you're on the way there. So I would just say to keep pursuing that dream. So.
Yeah, I feel like you guys are so rich with a point of view and things to say. Like, I've said it already, but I really am inspired by that. And I think that you just have to keep doing what you were meant to do, and you keep collaborating and building your own networks, because the world is changing. Like, the way that I came up, it was very hard to move like a millimeter forward, right? And like, media is so accessible now. Technology is so accessible now. I mean, I didn't cut on film when I first started, but when I was an assistant editor, I still had to do negative cut lists. Like, that's how far back that things are. And now it's just, you could make a movie on your phone right now. My phone is amazing in terms of that. So there's really no obstacle in that regard. And I think you guys can build your own studio system. I really do. I've seen it today. So yeah. But keep talking to each other and keep stay in each other's loops.
Yeah, and definitely, the stories that you're telling is uniquely you. So when you're approaching these programs, just think about it that way. Like, what's a story that only I can tell that nobody else can, right? There's so many different versions and themes of similar stories out there. But when you're approaching these programs, it's like, what's this version of story that only I can tell? So hopefully that unique point of view will shine through on your application.
Yeah, I feel when I come into an episode, I'm always really just focusing on what is this story about, right? And if there's something specific to a character that needs it to be a character of a certain race, like, I understand that for plot. But there are often times where there's open casting, and that's an opportunity to put your stamp on things. The shows that I work for are very inclusive in that way. And there's always creativity as a director. You can really put your stamp on things, even in terms of like a production design element or a prop or something. And the collaboration that I found on the shows that I've worked on, they're always open to something new. Like, you have something on the page, but it might inspire another visual or another concept. And I feel I'm in a safe, trusted space where I can bring that. So it's always an opportunity to push forward, but then there just might be times where it's not relevant, and I don't know, I guess the way I move through the world is just, what does the story need? What does it ask for? And then how can I maybe bring another perspective? If this is thematically what we're talking about, we can add a new layer or a new, that's always exciting if I can do that.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier too, it's your leadership. It's up to the leadership to create that inclusive environment, right? To creating that safe space. So when you walk into those spaces, think about the times when you felt included in a production, and what were those, those actions that kind of gave you that feeling of being included. So definitely creating that safe space is very important, so that you can be authentically you and bring your full self to work and be authentic. So that's, don't underestimate the importance of creating that inclusive environment around you.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's contagious, right? You start to meet someone who is just so open and warm and receptive, and it's the opposite of what you thought that experience would be, and you just pay it forward as well. It like catches like wildfire, and again, everything just comes from a place of love and creativity and excitement when you're thriving in an environment like that.
Awesome. Go ahead. Well, I did mention, the authentic storytelling, and when you're going through the application, I can't emphasize how important it is to read your work and proofread it over and over, because you'll be surprised how many people have typos and mistakes under application. And to me, that is a red flag right away. Just doing a simple read through, having a friend read it, going through spell check, just things that you think might be obvious, but sometimes is not very obvious. So definitely read the instructions carefully, go through your application, and also be mindful of the deadlines. Like, don't procrastinate and wait till the very last minute. Also, be surprised about the number of applications we get at the last minute, and sometimes, you'll never know with technical difficulties and things like that. So submit your application as early as possible as well.
So in terms of your question, are you talking about like the material that I chose to go with as the short that I shot? Okay. Yeah, I think at the time, because I was an editor who had shadowed and knew that I wanted to get into a program, for me, I actually am not a writer, so I didn't know what I was going to shoot, and I knew that I was incapable of writing it. So the way that I approached that is I had a writer friend who he's my high school friend who I went to college with, and I was hoping that we could collaborate on something. But he could not get his stuff together in time, so he ended up sharing a friend of his who had like a pile of short films, who was like, hey, my friend said you could like read his stuff or whatever. And so in that pile, I found one that I just really resonated with. And ironically, it's not even something I would have thought to shoot or a story I would think to tell, but it just was so authentic and true that I had to like meet him. And so we hit it off really well. Come to find out, it was his life story. So there was a lot of truth there that it's just like, well, this seems to be it. I almost felt like it picked me in a weird way. So I kind of have this relationship of, I don't necessarily know what I want to say as a filmmaker yet, especially in television, where I just get assigned episodes and I get to tell that story. So for me, being here at CAAMFest and seeing the stories you guys choose to tell is so amazing to me. And yeah, one day maybe I'll be in a place where I know exactly what that is and what I want to say. But right now, I'm in the land of like telling all these great different stories. And it just so happened that that short found me. And I would go on to say that even another short that I did later was so the opposite, and actually probably more what I thought my first film would be. But I don't know. It's just, that's how it worked out for me. Yeah, it's so hard because I feel very lucky in that I got into the program right before the pandemic hit the year before. So I was the last class to be able to do it in person. But even still, like the pandemic, the double strike, we all had setbacks. But now's the time for you to just get to know who you are, practice your craft. Even though the industry isn't quite ready yet, this is a good time for you to grow. Collaborate, network, and because you're directors, you all need to direct, and you should keep directing. So you could have a whole portfolio of things as the industry is figuring itself out. It is going through such crazy change right now. It's like stuff that I've never even seen. It just seems like a joke. But not to get discouraged, because this is where you learn things. It's all these obstacles and adversities that turn you onto a new corner, and you discover things. So you just have to keep going if that's what you're being pulled to do.
Yes, definitely put your work out there, because you never know who's going to see it. So, any other questions? Yes, hi.
Yeah, I feel like as an editor, I was always someone who was like a chameleon. I would just sort of mimic what the show was. So I get into that mode when I'm prepping for a show, so that I could be able to just jump in and shoot another episode of their show. But the episode itself can be, depending on what it is, can be really creative and interesting, or deal with certain topics that, like, this is unusual for the show, and then I might go out and seek things that inspire me or that I think of. Music is something that's very powerful for me. I'll often do it while, like, I'm washing dishes or whatever. But then I have a playlist of songs that I collect, and as I'm going through, sometimes it inspires me, or sometimes it's not something I discover until I'm, like, in the cut with an editor. But it's just being open, because I feel like you can go through many passes of creativity, and every time I read the script one more time, I discover new things. Or I'm driving somewhere, then all of a sudden that idea drops in my head, and it just, connects. So it's just being malleable, open, and I don't know, I'm just all things consuming when I'm in my episode, and things do reveal themselves to me.
One of my favorite things about the creative process is that light bulb moment where everything just clicks, and you're like, ah.
And sometimes it's not until you're on set, again, when someone else is bringing their juice, and you're just like, that's it, we're doing that.
Yeah, exactly. We have time for one more question, if anybody wants to close it out. Oh, 2 questions. Okay, we'll take the 2 questions, the last 2 questions.
Oh, I've had too many to count. And that's the thing. You do get tested constantly, because in this industry, it's not like a corporate job where I have a lot of friends who climb the corporate ladder, and it's like guaranteed promotions every year. Whereas with this industry, you literally have to start at the bottom and get destroyed every time. And it's just like, you have to love rejection, and you have to be grateful for it, because that was the only coping mechanism that I had in order to keep going, is that I still couldn't do anything else. I was so passionate about this one thing, but it doesn't always reward you. And I also feel like hard work is that work ethic that I had is the one thing that I could just keep persevering. But the thing when I was an editor, I realized about myself is that I'm a sprinter. I'm not a marathon runner. Not in the physical sense, I'm a bad athlete in general. But when it comes to like my actual momentum, editing was 10 months a year, all the time, crazy hours, and directing is like a sprint. So I can be intense, which I like to do about my work, but it will end. Once that 3 weeks is over, I turn in my cut, I'm good, and I let that go. Whereas with editing, it's just like, here comes another episode, and it burns you out, and burnout is real. And I would reach the point where I would come to the end of the season, like threaten to quit, do something else, and then get just enough rest where I was like, oh, I miss it, and then like torture myself again. And it's a cyclical thing. And then I ended up being on season 1 shows that would just get canceled 5 years in a row. So you just start to feel like, when am I gonna get my break? Also, I came up during a time where a lot of editors didn't move, like they didn't go anywhere. So the opportunity was not really there, and there weren't as many shows on the air. So yeah, you will always get tested. And I think sometimes that lesson is long, like I call it the dark ages, but I did have a breakthrough, and I think that breakthrough came probably when I was finally ready to do something else.
Yeah, you mentioned that reset, and the mental health aspect of it is very important too. Just you got to take care of yourself and keep doing the job that you want to do, and that reset is so important.
Yeah, you gotta stay sane too, and find other things to keep you balanced. I think that's one thing I really struggle with, is because I really am a perfectionist and I really like working hard, and so I need people in my life to pull me back and be like, you need to sit down and chill for a bit, So I'm better about that, but also I guess the message being that when I did find a job that aligned with my natural biorhythms, as I could say, I found much more happiness and peace with it. But it will be a long road, and it will be hard, and you just have to keep reminding yourself why you're doing it.
All right, you're the last question.
So I guess what I'm grappling with is like this on the fellowship applications, like be authentic versus how much is oversharing. Like I don't want to have a full-on therapy session on paper. So is there something that you shouldn't mention on the app, like besides spelling and proofreading? Are there any other big red flags that you shouldn't talk about?
Good question. I don't know. To me, I don't know. Everybody has a different level of comfort in terms of what they want to share or don't want to share. To us, it's just how are we interpreting that? Is the story that you're trying to tell us authentic? And I think when you're sharing it, depending on how much or how little you want to share, if it's coming through the page, we'll see it. So I think it's up to each applicant on how willing they're able to share their story. But to us, it's more about the authenticity of it rather than the amount or the quantity of the information you're willing to share. So yeah,
I think you should be bold and be brave and just go for it, because why hold yourself back? And that's the one thing with me, I was very shy, and also but I was very passionate about what I love to do. So I realized at a certain point, if I didn't tell people what I wanted to do, then I was the one holding myself back. And I wasn't okay with that. I had to let that be known. And if I didn't get in or if I got rejected, that's fine. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. But at least I spoke up for myself. So I feel like when it comes to these applications, you always want to try and fit the mold of whatever, but I really just think you need to put yourself on the page. So just go for it.
Yeah, I think that's important. Just go for it. It's the big takeaway from this. It's because especially being in this space, you want to try and tell your story, but I guess the question is how you want to tell your story is important. So, and that's a process that everyone in this creative industry is going through, right? How do you want to tell your story, or how do you want to, convey your message? All right. Well, with that, thank you so much, Charissa, for sharing your experience, sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you, CAAM, for having us. If you all want to find out some of the programs that we have to offer, we have programs in scripted, unscripted, and the narrative nonfiction space. So make sure you're following us on social. These are all of our different social access. WBD Access is the US page, and we also have a website, warner-access.com, that has a full list of all the programs we have to offer in all the different spaces. We're also in like animation. Charissa's modeling our wonderful DC brand, Wonder Woman. So yes, please make sure you check us out on our website, follow us on Instagram, and yeah, any questions you can relay on any of those social platforms. So thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. And we're around if you have any additional questions or want to ask us anything. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.